Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Shackle 5858. I am Amish Shackle. Following news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please let's go to the headlines.
Tonight, breaking news, at least 2 people are dead and multiple people injured, including police officers, after a church shooting on this Sunday in Kentucky. And dangerous weather from coast to coast, including a flash flood threat in the Northeast. First, authorities say the Kentucky incident started with a trooper-involved shooting near the airport. Police say the suspect fleeing the scene after a carjacking before ending up at a Baptist church in Lexington. The new details coming in tonight. Rivers rising again in the same areas devastated by the catastrophic flooding along the Guadalupe River in central Texas. Heavy rain causing rivers and streams to surge. The search for the more than 160 people missing temporarily suspended in central Texas as hot and dry conditions are fueling fast-moving wildfires in the Grand Canyon. Hundreds evacuated. The new flash flood danger in the Northeast. Our weather team is tracking it all. President Trump is threatening the European Union and Mexico with new 30% tariffs on some of America's biggest trading partners. What this could mean for American consumers and businesses. A small plane crashed shortly after takeoff outside of London, sending a fireball and plumes of smoke into the sky. What we're learning tonight. Also tonight, President Trump teases a major statement on Russia tomorrow. This as he escalates criticism of Vladimir Putin amid a barrage of attacks on Ukraine. Will Ukraine get more Patriot missile batteries? Marcus Moore on the details. The soccer showdown in New Jersey. Paris Saint-Germain and Chelsea battle for the FIFA Club World Cup final. President Trump among the spectators. The men's final at Wimbledon. Another epic matchup between 2 of the world's best players. But who claimed the Wimbledon trophy? America Strong, remembering the fallen firefighter who lost his life protecting his family 1 year after the assassination attempt on President Trump.
ABC News World Headquarters in New York. This.
Take a look at what happened.
The Secret Service did not co-locate its security room with local law enforcement.
There was no walkthrough. I spent a little bit of time there Friday evening. There was an incident with between Secret Service.
Well, it was unforgettable. I didn't know exactly what was going on.
It's been 1 year since that tragic day in Butler, Pennsylvania, when President Trump narrowly escaped an assassin's bullet. Hello, everyone. I'm Griff Jenkins, along with Lisa Booth, Alicia Acuna, and David Webb, and this is the Big Weekend Show. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only threat against the president in the past year. Just 2 months later, Ryan Ruth, a second potential assassin, was caught with a gun at Trump's golf course in Palm Beach, Florida. Ruth has a long criminal record, including arrest for carrying a weapon without a permit and a hit-and-run charge. But Ruth and Butler shooter Thomas Crooks aren't the only people who are targeting President Trump. A new book details an alarming threat.
They certainly have an elevated level of protection around him, even compared to other presidents. But I will say on the campaign trail, what we found was they had kill teams in the United States, the intelligence folks still telling them, folks in the states who wanted to kill him.
Terry Laughlin and Jeff, thank you for joining us. Have been apprehended, or is President Trump's life still in danger? That was Josh Dawson. Here.
This is something that we are active focused on. Alive. No mission. It is upon us to be extra honed and hardened in our investigations against the president, all of our leaders, and make sure that they're safe. And so. Especially on the ground in these
Residents of an Ontario town lash out at police over their investigation into an alleged sexual assault on a young girl.
If you guys are calling for a child, that should be there when the call is put out.
What officers had to say about why they told the public it was an animal attack. Rosie responds.
I know he can't do that, but the Supreme Court has given him unbridled powers.
Why President Trump is threatening to revoke O'Donnell's U.S. citizenship, and how do Americans feel about Trump's immigration crackdown? Plus, wrangling with the record books.
Read a lot about it. It sounds like
This could be making week at the Calgary MP.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Jeff Simple.
Good evening for joining us. We begin in rails for from residents of a rural Ontario community following a disturbing attack on an 8-year-old girl. Investigators initially said it was caused by an animal, but 2 weeks later they arrested a 17-year-old, now charged with attempted murder and sexual assault with a weapon. Last night, nearly 100 people packed the community centre in Quadville, west of Ottawa, pressing police on the steps taken during the early stages of their investigation.
How did it take you guys as long as it did to find that little girl? Almost 6 hours.
It took 2 weeks of us thinking it could potentially be an animal attack. Why so long?
Roughly how long from when you found that it wasn't an animal until you told us it wasn't an animal?
The 8-year-old victim was found with life-threatening injuries on June 24th, and she remains in hospital. Nathaniel Dove has the latest on the investigation from Quadville tonight.
And ABC IU.
Today, the Prime Minister gets down to business in China, spruiking economic ties with Australia's largest trading partner.
These discussions were an important step forward between our two nations.
Also ahead, Palestinian children collecting water killed by an Israeli strike in Gaza. The IDF says a malfunction was to blame. The federal government warned by the Treasury to raise taxes and cut spending to make the budget sustainable. And world number one, Yannick Sinner claims his first Wimbledon title, defeating Spain's Carlos Alcaraz in 4 sets. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Catherine Robinson. The Prime Minister has sat down with top business leaders in Shanghai on his 6-day trip to China. Anthony Albanese spruiked the Australian-Chinese economic relationship at a round table with top representatives from the steel industry. Australian coal and iron ore exports are critical to China's economic growth and pour hundreds of billions of dollars into government coffers. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jurgens is travelling with the Prime Minister and joins us now live from Shanghai. Hi there, Stephen. What was the focus of today's meeting?
Well, unsurprisingly, Catherine, the focus was on Australia's vast resources trade with China. I mean, you mentioned it there in your intro, but it's worth remembering for decades now, or at least a couple of decades, Australian resources have really fueled China's extraordinary economic boom, building many of the skyscrapers that you see around us here in Shanghai, the commercial metropolis. And of course, that's also been critical for Australian prosperity because it's poured literally hundreds of billions of dollars into Australian government coffers. But that could be changing, because what we're seeing now in China is a shift. It's not only reducing its steel production, it's also trying to use more recycled steel. It's looking increasingly for other suppliers of iron ore, which is the most important resource that we've got plugged into this system. And of course, over the long term, most importantly, it's also looking to decarbonise its sector. And that means that Australia can no longer simply assume that it can dig up things like iron ore and coal and send it to China and
This is DW News, live from Berlin. Germany's chancellor sounds the alarm over Donald Trump's trade war. Friedrich Merz warns new 30% levies from the United States would strike at the heart of the German economy, but the EU is still holding out hope for a deal with the White House. Also on the program, health officials in Gaza say at least 8 Palestinians, including 6 children, are killed collecting water at an aid distribution point. Meanwhile, in Israel, families of hostages pile pressure on the government to bring their loved ones home. in Berlin.
This is Sky News, the headlines. A small plane crashes and explodes seconds after taking off from Southend Airport in Essex. Witnesses say the pilots had waved to passers-by as they prepared for the flight. Also ahead. 6 children are among those reported killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. The IDF says one of its missiles malfunctioned. Parents are urged to vaccinate their children after a child with measles dies in Liverpool. More government hints that the Chancellor will hike taxes in her autumn budget. Thus, England's Lionesses cruise into the quarterfinals of the Euros with a convincing win over Wales. And swapping the White House for Windsor Castle, Donald Trump's second state visit to the UK is confirmed for September. Good morning, welcome to the programme. We begin with an emergency at Southend Airport in Essex, where a small aircraft crashed and exploded shortly after taking off. It's not yet clear how many people were on board. Witnesses say the pilots had waved at passers-by as they prepared to take to the skies. Well, the airport remains closed until further notice, with all flights to and from Southend cancelled. Our correspondent...
This is Asia Now.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 8:30 in New Delhi and 10 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Ilakia Silveraji. Your headlines this hour. Singapore's economy grew faster than expected in the second quarter, despite rising risks from higher U.S. tariffs. GDP expanded 4.3% in the 3 months ended June, accelerating from the 4.1% it recorded in the first quarter and exceeding forecasts for the period. The European Union puts off retaliatory measures against U.S. tariffs until early August as officials seek a deal to avoid sweeping 30% levies. And U.S. President Donald Trump pledges more Patriot air defense systems for Ukraine as he's set to make a major statement on Russia later today. New sanctions for Moscow are expected to put pressure on the Kremlin to return to the negotiating table. Ideas.
Situation.
No, you're officially avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
If you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Hannah Akwe, for an informative, interactive news program with difference. It's fun. No, you didn't say that, Dave. It's a surprise.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Then join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, it's 11 p.m. I'm Ben Leo, and this is Ben Leo Tonight, the late edition. It's 1 year on from the attempted assassination of President Donald Trump as he reflects on that unforgettable moment.
It was unforgettable. I didn't know exactly what was going on. I got whacked. I think they shot 8 bullets. Then one got me.
And we've got some great pictures coming in from New Jersey, where President Trump has just been celebrating with the Chelsea Football Club team after they beat Paris Saint-Germain in the FIFA Club World Cup. You won't want to miss those movie images in just a tick. Elsewhere, more migration loopholes as the Daily Telegraph tomorrow reveals diversity and inclusion staff are now eligible for skilled work visas in Britain. And on the continent, tensions are running high in Spain as riot police are sent out to subdue clashes between protesters and North African migrants.
Good morning, I'm Oliver Farry and this is Daybreak. As France gears up for its annual Bastille Day military parade, Emmanuel Macron announces a rise in military spending. His government will make an additional €6.5 billion available to the armed forces over the next 2 years. Donald Trump announces the United States will send Patriot air defense missiles to Ukraine in a sign of increasing frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump said Putin talks nice and then he bombs everybody in the evening. An Israeli missile strike on a water collection point in Gaza kills 8 Palestinians, 6 of them children. The strike on the Nuseirat refugee camp was among several on Sunday that resulted in the deaths of 40 people in the enclave. Israel says the strike was an error which missed its intended target. And in the final of the Club World Cup, there was a shock as Chelsea beat the seemingly unassailable Europe.
Hello there, very good morning. Good to see you on this Monday morning. July set to be the busiest month ever for Channel migrant crossings.
Almost 1,400 small boat migrants have now crossed the English Channel since Thursday.
Well, the surge comes just days after the government signed the one-in, one-out deal, but has it made any difference?
And meanwhile, Southend Airport will remain closed until further notice after an aircraft crashed just moments after takeoff.
Buckingham Palace confirms dates of President Trump's state visit, with the King and Queen to host him at Windsor Castle.
And a chance of royal reconciliation. Senior aides to the King and Prince Harry have been seen together in London, possibly opening a channel of communication between the two warring sides for the first time in years.
A climate analyst calls for calm as the Met Office warns that extreme weather is becoming the norm in Britain.
And as new research suggests, many parents are now spending significant sums on gadgets to help keep kids occupied. We're asking, is tech making parents lazy?
Good morning. Yannick Sinner is the new Wimbledon winner. The world number 1 came from a set down to beat rival and reigning champion Carlos Alcaraz to win the men's singles title on centre court. And in the Club World Cup, Chelsea stunned PSG to take the trophy. President Donald Trump joining in the celebrations.
The heat wave coming to an end for most of us, with blood pressure starting to move in. Find out all the weather details coming up soon.
Hello there on this Monday morning. A very good morning to you. I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Dawn Lisa with the CTV News Breakfast.
Good morning, everyone. It's 6 o'clock. Leah and Rob here. On today's programme, investigators on site at Southend Airport after an aeroplane crash.
Plus, economists claim the cost of living crisis is over, but we've been looking at why it doesn't feel that way for many households.
Yeah, absolutely. It's Monday, the 14th of July. Southend Airport is closed after a plane bound for the Netherlands crashed into a fireball moments after takeoff. Buckingham Palace confirms the dates for President Trump's second state visit, including a stay with the King at Windsor Castle. We meet the activists leading the fight against Donald Trump's sweeping immigration raids. In sport, Yannick Sinner swipes his first Wimbledon title, beating defending champion Carlos Alcaraz. And then in football, the Lionesses cruise into the Women's Euros quarter-finals with a 6-1 win over Wales. Hello, good morning everyone. Well, Southend Airport is closed until further notice, with all flights in and out cancelled. It's all after a small plane crashed seconds after takeoff. Witnesses say the pilots waved at onlookers moments before the aircraft exploded into a huge fireball. It's not clear how many people were on board. Amelia Harper reports.
A fireball with black smoke billowing meters into the sky. Behind those trees, the runway at London Southend Airport. The sound of a burning plane clearly heard. At just before 4 p.m, police were called after a 12-metre-long plane crashed to the ground. Witnesses outside the airport described watching it unfold.
Africa News. The news.
Scheduled to take place for the first time in almost 40 years, local and municipal elections in the Central African Republic have been once again postponed. Initially planned for the end of August, officials say the vote will now be held in December in conjunction with the legislative and presidential elections. President Touadéra launched a biometric voter registration exercise last year to update the electoral roll. Authorities say the postponement is due to a delay in mobilizing funds, as well as technical and organizational hiccups. Members of the opposition BRDC are calling for an overhaul of the electoral authority and a dialogue with President Touadéra. CAR has been battling conflict since 2013, when predominantly Muslim rebels seized power and forced the then president from office. The United Nations has said the elections represent a crucial opportunity to strengthen democratic governance, promote reconciliation, and consolidate stability. The landlocked country is one of the poorest in the world, despite having significant natural resources, including uranium and oil.
Just days before a trial was set to begin, a last-minute settlement is clinched between Boeing and Paul Noroje, who lost his entire family in the deadly 2019 crash of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302. The Canadian national was suing the aviation giant for millions, citing the deep emotional trauma he's endured since the crash. In March of 2019, Noroje's wife, 3 children, and mother-in-law were flying to their native Kenya when the Boeing 737 MAX malfunctioned shortly after takeoff. The plane plummeted to the ground, killing all 157 people on board. Noroje says he hasn't been able to return to his family home in Toronto because the memories are too painful. He struggled to find work and has faced criticism from extended family for not traveling with his wife and children that day. While the exact terms of the settlement remain confidential, the case was expected to bring renewed scrutiny to Boeing 737 MAX, which has been plagued by safety issues. The Ethiopian crash, along with a similar tragedy in Indonesia just months earlier, claimed a total of 346 lives.
Iran's foreign minister says his country is ready to resume nuclear talks with the United States, but must have assurances there will be no more attacks against it. Abbas Arahi made the comments on Saturday during a meeting with foreign diplomats in Tehran.
همواره آماده گفتگو در خصوص برنامه هسته‌ای خودمون بودیم و در آینده هم خواهیم بود.
We have always been ready for talks over our nuclear program and will be ready for them in the future.
که اگر دوباره مذاکراتی شروع شد
But naturally, we must be assured that if negotiations are restarted, they will not result in war by the US or other countries. Arahi said Tehran will also consider requests from the UN's nuclear watchdog after suspending cooperation following Israeli and American strikes on the country's nuclear facilities last month. All of our cooperation with the agency from now on will be managed through the Supreme National Security Council. Demands of the IAEA for continuation of its monitoring, for continuation of cooperation with Iran, will be reviewed by the Supreme National Security Council, case by case, and should be done based on Iran's security concerns. Arahi said Iran intends to continue enriching uranium on its soil despite US objections. Iranian authorities say they haven't yet been able to access the nuclear facilities to assess the damage. Kenya the elephant arriving in her new home at the Elephant Sanctuary in central western Brazil. She's the newest resident of the 1,000-hectare refuge. Getting her here from her previous home in Mendoza, Argentina, wasn't easy. Kenya's trip is over. It was a 5-day trip, almost 4,000 kilometers from Mendoza to the sanctuary in Chapada dos Guimaras in Mato Grosso. More than 20 people were directly involved in the motorcade, with police escorts from the border in Foz de Iguaçu until the sanctuary. After spending most of her life alone in a zoo, Kenya will join 6 other Asian elephants, including the previous newcomer, Poopy, who arrived in April. Now she only needs to get used to her new environment. It should be very quick, like Poopy. Soon they'll be together exploring this very rich place of more than 50,000 square meters of forests, where they can enjoy nature. It's an enriching environment for them, and that's what they deserve. The elephant sanctuary, Brazil, is now home to 7 elephants, all rescued after decades in circuses or zoos.
Tonight, the dangerous new floods affecting the recovery in Texas and wildfires burning out of control at the iconic Grand Canyon. Central Texas, once again, the scene of evacuations and rescues. Heavy rain triggering major floods, washing out roads, and the recovery mission from last week's deadly catastrophe forced to pause.
It slows down, but it's not over.
Our team going behind the scenes with first responders. Wildfires burning out of control near the Grand Canyon. This popular historic lodge now gone. 2 people dead after a dramatic shooting spree in Kentucky. A state trooper hit at the airport. The suspect later opening fire again at a church, the latest on the investigation. Exactly 1 year after the first assassination attempt against President Trump, the critical failures described in a scathing new report out today. Growing anger from some of the president's supporters over his administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case. Several people killed in Gaza, officials there say. Some of them, children trying to get water. And now, new fears ceasefire talks could collapse. Why the AI chatbot Grok just said sorry to its users. Latest push by a team of scientists trying to create a real-life Jurassic Park to bring back an extinct species. And there's good news tonight about a blast from the past and one man's calling to help his neighbors.
This is NBC Nightly News with Hallie Jackson.
Tonight, a new weather threat for Texas. Heavy rain pounds a region devastated by flooding and loss.
I'm Karen Wall in Kerrville, Texas, where heavy rain brings new danger to this devastated community. How it's impacting the search for the missing.
In the west, wildfires explode. Flames at the Grand Canyon's north rim destroying a historic lodge. Smoke from Canadian wildfires choking the Midwest. Also tonight,
It's a very dangerous job being president.
1 year after Butler, Pennsylvania, new scrutiny of the Secret Service.
This was a cover your ass sort of moment.
I'm Willie James and been traveling with the president in New Jersey as he reflects on the moment that nearly ended his life.
Lingering mystery. Why did he do it?
I'm Scott McFarland. There are new insights into the man who pulled the trigger a year ago this weekend in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Plus, intensifying attacks. Russia swarms Ukraine with drones, spreading fear and frustration.
I'm Chris Livesay in Rome, where the U.S. is showing signs of maybe shifting support back to Ukraine.
And later, major milestone. A powerhouse choir, an American-born religion. Today, commemorating nearly a century of music and messages. We'll look back.
On behalf of listeners across the globe, we say thank you to the choir for the spirit they have shared week after week.
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, the search for victims in the Texas Hill Country is interrupted by heavy rain as officials warn of a renewed threat of flash flooding. Then how Russia used Brazil as a launching pad for Vladimir Putin's deep cover operatives around the world. And from New York to Seattle and across the globe, why some of the world's most populous cities are slowly sinking.
In a place like Mexico City, up to 20 inches a year of sinking. In the United States, it's a little bit less, but it's still sort of slow motion crisis that's forward across the country.
Major funding for PBS.
Thank you very much for giving time to Amir Shackle 5858. I am Amir Shackle. Have a good life. Bye-bye.